Retiring Well Connection video series. I'm here with Alan Christian. Alan is a good friend of mine, first of all, but also someone who I've done business with a couple of times already. And he is with the Alan Christian Mortgage team. And I just wanted to thank you, Alan,
Yeah.
for being with us today and sharing some of your insight. At Retiring Well, we have a list of elements of retirement. We have 10 elements of retirement that we look at when we think about the life in retirement and how we can make sure that we're balanced in that life. One of those elements is home. And I know that through the pandemic and all the different challenges we've faced through this process, home has been an area of great importance. Many of us are sitting in our homes now, and it's also been an area of reflection for people, especially those who maybe they're empty nesters or maybe they are retired and they're going, wow, is this actually where I want to live? Do I want to, do I want the big home still? Do I want to move to a different state? We've seen a lot of migration take place. And I know this is a conversation that's come up a lot with my clients over the last year. And I wanted to talk to you specifically as we're kind of experiencing this shift and change. What are some of the things that you've seen in your business over the last year, sort of the current landscape of sort of this home decision and where rates are, et cetera?
It's been a very interesting years, 20 plus years in the industry. And right now we're truly at historically low levels as far as rates. We've heard it for, oh, rates are low. This is the lowest they've ever been. So it's a crazy time as far as where you can get loans, interest rates now. Your purchasing power is so much higher because rates are lower. Flip side is we don't have a lot of inventory. And you hear the stories of I had somebody recently, there were 100 showings on a home over a 2-day window with over 30 full price, actually above list price offers on the home. So there's not a lot of inventory right now. So it's just a different market. They just weren't building for so many years after the last crash. So it's a different time frame right now.
Yeah, wow. The whole home buying experience is something that's changed probably a lot,
Yeah.
Especially for someone who's retired. Maybe they are still in the house they bought 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
They're looking at making a change. And, there's the buying experience, but there's also the financing side. And I know a lot of our retiring clients, they paid off their mortgage before they retired. That was a
Yep.
goal that they had. They wanted to be debt free going into retirement, which is a grand goal and a nice place to be.
Yep.
And now many of them are kind of looking at the situation and going, man, rates are really low, as you mentioned, and
Yeah.
maybe a mortgage would work for me. Another thing I've seen a lot is I want to move, and we found a great place. And I know you've heard this kind of story before. We found a great place. Now we have to think about selling our current home that we've been in forever, preparing it to sell, the overwhelm that comes with that. But how do we bridge the gap between these two different transactions? Talk about what you've seen with folks who are sort of dealing with this sort of transition for the first time in a long time.
Now, for folks that have not bought, and I've got so many clients this way, they've not bought anything in 30 years. I'm like, well, what's happening now? And one of the things that you just said, which is one of the things that one of my very first conversations is before you go look for a house. I mean, if you're joyriding, you see something, like, oh, wow, it sparks an interest to move. But the very first thing you should do before you start looking at home is get your finances in order. So we can look at it and find out exactly what you can do right now. Ideally, my favorite client, somebody that is months away from getting ready to purchase something, because it gives us plenty of time to go through, look at multiple scenarios. If their home is completely paid off and they need to use some of the equity in that home to purchase the next one, and they want to do that before they sell it, there are certain strategies you need to do that if you go ahead and list your house, you can't do it anymore. So it's really about before you start looking, let's review everything. And then, Charlie, that's where you and I kind of partner together, because a mortgage is just one part of your portfolio, and you've got to be sure that you structure it correctly before you get started doing anything.
Yeah. And I think that one reason the mortgage keeps coming up is most people go into it thinking, I'm going to use my portfolio to purchase a home. You know, I'm going
Right.
to stay debt free. I'm going to continue to kind of keep that level. But the good news is there's a lot of gains in a lot of these portfolios over the last
Right.
decade plus. And the cost of actually getting access to that much capital is
Yep.
proven to be, pretty high just from a tax standpoint, and probably not doing anything but going up if tax legislation changes. And
Right.
so the mortgage idea kind of keeps coming up more and more as, wow, this may actually be the least expensive way to either bridge the gap or make the purchase on the home. What are some of those things that, if I'm thinking about a retiree, they have no earned income and they are debt free, they
Yep.
have a nice portfolio, they have, maybe a large IRA. What are some of the things that they need to be thinking about to do what you just said, which is being prepared ahead of when they actually want to start making this decision?
Well, for folks that are already retired, there's two different scenarios that we can look at for income. And there's plenty of folks that have a large portfolio, but they're not drawing a lot of money out of that account because they don't need it. They truly just don't need the money because everything they have is paid off and they're living on a couple thousand, $3,000 a month and they don't need it. But if they're getting ready to go in and purchase a new home, they're going to need some income. So there's really two different classifications that we look at. If the money is in a true retirement account, IRA, anything else you've got, if it's a true retirement account, we can set it up to where you can set up distributions. So if we need to have, let's just say $4,000 a month in income, so they've only been getting $1,000 a month or two, but we need to have a larger number, you can set up the distribution from a retirement account. And as long as we get 2 months of those checks showing the money's been coming out, we can use that for income. The only catch is we need to be sure that whatever that monthly amount coming out, that'll last for at least 3 years, 36 months for the portfolio. And many, many times that's what we do. So we need $4,000. We do the distribution, get 2 months there. If it's in a non-retirement account, that's looked at completely different. That's when they're going to look over, they're going to divide it out by 240 months, basically 20 years. So that amount's not as high as you would think. People say, I got $500,000. Well, divide that out by 240. That's not as much as you think for qualifying. So most of the time we do it off of retirement accounts to set it up.
Okay, so just to recap that, retirement accounts, because you're taking a distribution, is taxable income. It's
Yep.
all ordinary income. You
Yep.
only need 2 months of that to show
That's it.
the income stream needed. And then if you're using non-qualified assets, or like we call taxable assets,
Right.
those would be more asset-based, right? You're looking
Correct.
at the base of assets versus the income stream that's coming off of that. Okay.
Correct. We're creating the income stream same way. It's just it's a much smaller number because they look at a retirement account, long as we got it for 36 months. So that's a big number. But if you got to divide it out by 240, that's a much smaller number.
Right. And this is assuming that their pension income or social security income or things like that aren't necessarily sufficient, or
Correct.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. If we can use social security income, pension income, if there's any kind of shortfall, where can we use their portfolio? That's where I'm saying there's some creative ways to do this. And I'll tell you, very few people in my industry know how to do this at all.
Yeah, got it. Is there anything different on the refinancing side that someone needs to think about if they just want to refinance the home, or even use that equity to purchase the next home? Are there any nuances there?
If you've got, if you're planning to use the equity in your current home to purchase the second one, your next house, and you want to do that, and you want to purchase the house before you sell your current one, so you're not having to sell and move in immediately, you can go in and get a line of credit on your current home for most of the equity in there, depending what your position is. The challenge is in the last year, the guidelines have actually gotten tighter because of COVID. Banks have gotten nervous. So they've gotten a little tighter on it, but you can go in and get a line of credit on your home. Problem is, if you list your house, you can't get a line of credit anymore. And then the term of bridge loan comes in, but most of those have been shut down. So this is where I mentioned the mistake, the pitfalls that I see people do is they call me and say, my house is already on the market. We're already under contract to sell it. We're already under contract for a new house. Can I get a loan now? And you've already broken about 5 rules, and you've already potentially put yourself in a position that you can't do probably 4 of the things I would have recommended that would have made it very easy. So once again, first thing is just reach out, but you can definitely tap into the equity in your home. And there's, once again, a couple of steps to do that. It's step 1, 2, 3, and 4 to get that done. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to one of my favorite lines in our business, and it's better to prepare than to repair.
That's
And
right. That's right.
I think this is the same way. What about a situation where someone is nearing retirement? Let's say, hey, they're planning to retire by the end of this year,
Yep.
and they know they want to make some sort of transition or some sort of purchase, but their timing is fuzzy at best. Is there
Right.
anything that someone who's currently earning or planning to retire now, or even they're about to be retired but they're going to show earned income for the year, is there anything someone needs to be thinking about when that transition is really near term?
Well, the thing about that is you can't time it. You don't know. If you're still working your job, that's what we base everything on, because we base everything we do as of the time and the day of closing. So if you're still working the day that we're closing on your home, we can use your job. So that's what we're going to base everything as far as approval on. It turns out you're 1 day after that, everything just completely changed. So it is all about planning for it. But really the biggest thing is if you're thinking about moving, yeah, it's going to be better to do it before you retire. It's just going to be easier in most cases to go off of your regular salary, W-2, whatever job you've got. It's easier to do that. And the biggest pitfalls, once again, it's about planning in advance. Sometimes people make the mistake and think, I want to be sure that I'm 100% debt free. And then they go and they pay everything completely off. And then in some cases, they go in and they close accounts out. And that can actually negatively affect your credit scores. So taking some of those steps, not knowing the ramifications, can kind of put you in a place you may have not wanted to be. But once again, anything as far as just planning, it's really the sooner that I can have a conversation, we can walk that through, the better. But it's just stay conservative, pay your bills on time, save your money up, and then we'll base it on 2 scenarios. If you haven't retired yet or after, we'll have to look at both of those.
Got it. One question that I have is really not necessarily retirement related, it's more broad, but I think sometimes people are overwhelmed with what all they have to pull together and have ready to go in the process. Can you kind of just give a brief overview of kind of what they need to do to kind of get their house in order, so to speak, from a document standpoint and everything else, to be able to provide your team with what they need?
Yep. It's actually, because we just bought my wife a new van recently, it's really probably easier to buy a house than it is to get a car. I mean, it's not that much, but typically if somebody, if they're still working their job, typically last 30 days of pay stubs, last 2 months of bank statements and asset accounts, copy of driver's license. In some cases, we may need tax returns or self-employed or things like that. If they are already retired, same thing. We're still going to need those asset accounts. Now, I tell folks, if you've got 5 different accounts and you got $10 million sitting somewhere, I don't need to see all of that. I need to see just enough for us to get your loan approved. I don't want to add anything outside of that to complicate it. But really, it's just pulling those items together and having access to them, either if you want to have them in paper format or electronically that you can upload. But it's just pulling those items together. And most of the things, Charlie, normally it's like for you, I reach out to you guys and y'all send it to us as soon as you get client's authorization. Beyond that, it's just a couple of things I need. It's really because people, they just don't know. They're afraid it's going to be overwhelming. But it's really not that much. It's most of the time people can pull it together in an afternoon and we're ready.
Yeah. And the electronic process is so easy. I know that's a lot of people get a little intimidated by, but it's very similar to what you do probably for your CPAs and others as well. And I know for me personally, when we did refinance this last year, it was a process, and and easy to get everything to you.
But let me tell you one thing with that though, because I still have this a lot. Just anybody hearing that, I don't like, and I'm on the computer all day, I don't like filling an online application if I don't have to. And some people, it can be overwhelming. I sent a courier to 3 people's homes this week. They didn't want to come here. It was too far. I'll have them come to your house. If you're more comfortable with that, I want to make it as easy as possible to get it done. So don't let that overwhelm you.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm going to ask you probably an unfair question because I get asked these questions all the time, and
Sure.
it's putting your prognostication hat on. We sort of look at the next year. Kind of what are you seeing on the landscape of your business and the interest rate world, and kind of what are you preparing yourself for as people think about the next year?
We just had a new election, new president in place right now. Watch gas prices. Gas has gone up. Rates have actually gone up. Now they're still at historic levels, but they have moved up some. I don't see inventory easing up right now. That's I think it's going to be on the horizon for a while. I think rates are probably going to tweak up a little bit. I don't think it's going to go from 3% to 5%. But just, I think on our current platform, it's probably going to tweak up. And that's where I mentioned kind of there's no way to time the market. You can't say, hey, I'm going to wait and buy in June because I think rates are going to be here, inventory is going to be there. People buy when they're ready to buy because a home is a part of their lifestyle and where they're going to live. So you can't time that. So if it's 3% or 3.5% or 4%, gosh, we remember, Charlie, it was when it was 8 and 10%. And some of the folks watching this when it was 18%. There's no way to time it, but I do feel like the inventory situation is not going to get easier, but some of the things that we do on the front end can help you get your offer accepted. Rates may tweak up a little bit, but it's really nothing that you can plan. There's nothing you can time for. When you're ready to move, you're ready to move.
That's great. That's great. Well, Alan, I appreciate your time today. I know this is going to be helpful information for anyone who's kind of delving into this. It can be a little overwhelming. And again, getting ahead of it and preparing and getting in early to talk to your team would be number one piece of advice that I would give folks. Alan, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Probably easiest thing, either phone number, which is direct 770-420-6422, or you can go to my website, which is alanchristian.com, alanchristian.com. That's
great. Well, I appreciate your time again, and thank you all for joining us today on the Retiring Well Connection. Thanks, Alan.
Got it. Thanks, Charlie.